Hello and happy Sunday everyone, and welcome to another bake along. It's been a little while since the last one, which was the Black Forest cake that I made, and you guys did a great job making that cake, and I'm going to give some of you a shout out later, so stay tuned, maybe your name will be read out. This one, however, is going to be for a really delicious, completely coincidentally gluten-free orange and almond cake, and it is so tasty. Now hopefully you've already been on Instagram this week and you've checked out the ingredients list, so you've got all your ingredients ready to roll, and there was an extra bit that you had to do in preparation for this recipe, which is to boil some oranges. If you haven't seen Instagram or done any of that stuff yet, don't worry, it's really simple to get prepared. So all I did was put 2 medium-sized oranges into some boiling water. I covered the top with a bit of greaseproof paper, and I just boiled those for 1.5 to 2 hours until they're nice and soft. And then once they'd cooled down a bit, I cut them open to get rid of all the pips, and then I just whacked them all into the food processor and blitzed them up till it was nice and smooth. And it ends up this really sort of delicious smelling orangey goopy paste, which we're going to use in our cake. So that's the oranges. You're also going to need 6 large eggs, which we're going to separate. You're going to need 300 grams of ground almonds, also known as almond flour, 225 grams of caster sugar, a tablespoon of honey, it can be either runny honey or set honey, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I've got another orange for decoration. I'm also using an 8-inch pan, which I'll line and grease, and just bits and pieces, a couple of bowls, a hand whisk, a regular whisk, a spatula, palette knife, a knife, chopping board, all the things. So I'm going to start by preparing my tin, and as I said, it's an 8-inch tin. I'm just going to grease it. This one is a spring form pan, but you can use a regular one if you don't have one of those. It's not that much different, it's just a bit easier to take out. And I'm going to just line it with some greaseproof paper, which I've already cut to size. All right, that's my tin ready. So, to start making the batter, first thing we're going to do is separate some eggs. So, as I said, 6 large free-range eggs. I always use free-range, as you know. And I'm just going to separate them directly into the bowl. So, if you haven't ever done this before and you're not quite sure how to separate eggs, then we have done a Tuesday tips video on how to separate eggs. Dane did it, and he gave you a few different methods. I sort of switch between methods, to be honest. Sometimes I use the shell, sometimes I use my hand. But it's quite fun actually and satisfying. The reason we are separating our eggs though is because this cake doesn't have any raising agent in it at all, and also because it hasn't got any butter, which, you know, traditionally in sponge cakes we would beat to get lots of air in. It's going to need all the sort of lightness to be coming from the eggs, so separating and adding whisked egg whites is really good for that. I'd like to say this is a healthy cake, but it still has lots of sugar in it, just because it doesn't have butter and whatnot in it. Doesn't mean it's healthy. So make sure you wash your hands, obviously, if you're worried about raw eggs being all over them, and just because it's kind of gross having egg all over your hands. So that is my 2 parts of eggs separated. So I'm going to put the whites to one side because we don't need those. So to the egg yolks, I'm going to add the honey first of all. And then the sugar, which I'm going to whisk immediately. And one of the first things I learned when I was learning how to bake is never to leave your sugar sitting with your egg yolks ever without mixing them, because what happens is the sugar starts to cook the egg yolks, kind of cook them. A little bit like, it's kind of a similar thing that happens when you add like acids to fish. It starts kind of cooking the fish. In the same way, the sugar starts cooking the egg yolks, and that's why sometimes you end up with little orangey blobs in your sponge. So like if you ever need to whisk, you know, if you ever need to be doing like sugar and egg yolks together, and you need to do something else, always give it a good whisk first, then go away, come back, carry on. Otherwise you're gonna have lots of orangey lumps. And you just want to whisk this until it's a little bit lighter and fluffier. So once it's quite a bit paler and it's kind of at ribbon stage, it is ready. So get rid of your whisk because we don't need that. And now it's time to add the almonds. So I am going to put them straight in, but I'm going to fold them in gently because they can release quite a bit of oil if you are a bit too vigorous with them. So just put them in and use a spatula or a metal spoon just to gently fold them through. That's all worked its way through. So now we're going to add the orange and do the same thing, just fold it gently. And at this point I'm also going to add 1/4 teaspoon of salt, just to bring out the flavour a little bit. If you don't want to, that's fine, it won't make too much difference. So then fold that through again, gently. And what I love about this cake is that it is naturally gluten-free, so it's not like you've had to go out and buy some kind of ridiculously over-processed, random, gluten-free thing, alternative. It just is, it's a really traditional cake, but it just happens to be GF. There's actually quite a lot of cakes out there that are accidentally gluten-free. And if you know of any, if you've got any favourites, why don't you just pop them down there in the comments box below, and maybe I'll do a video on it at some point. Oh, this smells so nice. Right, that's looking pretty well mixed. So now it is time to fluff up our egg whites. So just move everything out of the way. Grab back your egg whites, and I like to cheat. I don't know about you, but with egg whites, because they take a little bit longer than like the yolks to get where they need to be, I tend to not use a hand whisk. I tend to use the electric one because I'm lazy. So we're going to get these to stiff peaks, a little bit like how we did with the Black Forest cake. So you should have hopefully done this before and be massive pros. Now, if you've ever wondered what's actually going on here in the egg white cooking scenario, it's sort of scientific, but not that complicated. So basically, the proteins in the egg white are really, really tight when you first take them out of the egg, which is why they're all kind of gloopy. So what we do when we're whisking them is we're breaking down the proteins, and then at the same time trapping air in between the proteins so that it whips up like this. And that is why we can make things like meringues, and they go completely voluminous, why they add an extra lift to your cakes. Very clever eggs. That's looking pretty stiff to me. So now we need to add the egg whites to the main body of batter. And as usual, when you're doing egg whites, you want to put a small amount in to start with, just to loosen up the kind of stiffer side of things, and you don't need to be too gentle with that. It just needs to work its way through, and already, even just mixing this through now, it's already going quite a bit looser. And now you can go ahead and put the rest of your egg whites in, or if you want, you can do it in a couple of stages if you're nervous. I like to do it all in one. I like a challenge. And I'm using a spatula at the moment. You can use a metal spoon if you want. They're pretty good for folding, but just remember to be really gentle. So sort of scrape around the outside, bring it all into the middle, cut through the middle, and start sort of folding it around itself. I remember when I first started baking and first started using this technique, I'd get really impatient and just kind of think, oh, it's never gonna mix in, and then like just kind of beat it. Don't do that. It will mix in eventually. You might sort of see the odd little sort of cloud of egg white. Just kind of break it down a little bit with your spatula and just mix it in. It will happen eventually. It can take a few minutes. We are fully folded, people. So hopefully you are too, because now you need to put it into your tin. So grab your tin back and then just gently pour it in. And because it is quite sort of loose, this batter, it should even itself out pretty well. But if it doesn't, just use a palette knife just to flatten the top. Right. Now you can leave this naked, or you can even scatter some toasted almonds on the top. That looks really nice. But what I like to do is to decorate it with actual orange slices, because I think it's nice to indicate what cake it is by the topping sometimes. So I have another orange. There's a lot of oranges going on in this recipe. I'm just going to slice it nice and thinly. We're just at the end, or maybe even past blood orange season, but if you're watching this next year and or you have access to blood oranges still, then I reckon this whole cake would be so nice with blood oranges, and it would certainly look pretty cool with the slices on top. So I've got enough, I think, so I'm going to just arrange them in a nice pretty pattern. That looks really pretty. So now it's time to bake your cake. I'm using a fan-assisted oven at 170 degrees C. If you're not using a fan-assisted oven, add 15 to 20 degrees on top of that, Celsius. And this needs to be baked for quite a long time, so 45 to 55 minutes. Obviously, because the oranges on top are quite wet, sometimes it can seem a little bit soggy underneath, so make sure you use a skewer to do the test, and then just come back when it's out of the oven. Yeah. So while your cake is cooling down, we're going to make some syrup. This isn't 100% necessary with this cake because it is really lovely and flavourful and moist already, but I like to add a little bit of syrup just to keep it really moist, and also I like to add some aromatics in. So today I'm going to be using rosemary, but you can use thyme maybe, or cardamom pods just bashed up, cinnamon even, all those things are really nice. So I'm going to juice 2 oranges and half a lemon. So I'm using my lemon juicer to juice my oranges, which is kind of weird, and actually it's a little bit too small, but it seems to be doing the trick. It's making a terrible mess. I've got juice squirting out all over the shop. But yeah, just make sure you get as much juice as possible, and if you're using your bare hands, make sure they're nice and strong. And then I've just got 1/2 a lemon. I can't even get my orange out. I've got 1/2 a lemon as well. And as I said, I'm going to be using rosemary as an aromatic to flavour this syrup. You don't have to do that at all. You don't have to make this syrup if you don't want to. It's completely up to you. I've made this before with cardamom and it is really, really nice, but I had some rosemary growing in my garden and it was looking pretty healthy, so I thought I'd give it a go. So in you go. And then just add a little bit of sugar, 1 or 2 tablespoons to taste. You might not need all of that if your oranges are mega sweet, but I'm just going to add about 1 tablespoon, see how I get on. And then just pop that onto a medium heat, and you just want to stir that around basically over the heat until the sugar's all dissolved and it's maybe reduced a tiny bit so it's a little bit more syrup-like. So while this is doing its thing, probably about time I gave you my shout outs from the last bake along, the Black Forest cake. All of your cakes looked amazing, so well done. I really enjoyed seeing them on Instagram. Particularly I liked Sam Albert's, Holly England, Fat Annie, Elizabeth Louise Bakes and This Malaysian Bakes, who all made spectacular cakes and took really great photos. So make sure if you're doing this cake today, take pictures, put it on Instagram, use the hashtag Cupcake Jemma Bakes so that I can see them. I'll be hanging out on Instagram all day answering your questions, checking your stuff out, and also I will be here on YouTube checking your comments. So if you have any questions about this recipe or any other recipes, please let me know in the comments box. It smells so yummy. Right, so it is now drizzling time, and a little bit like with the lemon drizzle cake, what we're going to do is while the cake is still warm, we're going to stab it with loads of holes and then drizzle the drizzle on so that it all sinks in while it's still warm. And if you don't want to use all of your syrup because it looks like your cake is getting a little bit sodden, then just leave it. I'm going to. And then just leave that to cool down completely. So pause this video and come back when it's cool, and then we can eat it together. Hello, welcome back. Now I've actually kind of come in a little bit prematurely because my cake is still a little bit warm, which is actually how I like it, just a tiny bit warm. And sometimes I even like to serve it with ice cream. Don't tell anyone, but I don't have any ice cream today, so I'm just gonna eat it as it is. So let's have a little slice. As you can see, it has got quite a lot of nice color. Don't worry about all this sort of dark browning. That is really, really tasty, so don't panic if yours has gone brown. But let's crack it open. I can't wait, hang on. Oh my God. It's so moist and juicy and yummy. That is so tasty. You're gonna love it. And hopefully you're loving it right now with your very own cake. And if you are, and if you've made this, or if you've made this in the future, then please make sure you take a picture, put it on Instagram, and use the hashtag Cupcake Jemma Bake so that I can see it. And maybe I'll give you a shout out in my next bake along video, which will be in about a month. So tune in for that. Make sure you're following me on Instagram so that you don't miss the recipe and the ingredients list, so you're ready to roll. I'll be back next week at the usual time on Thursday, but before that there'll be a Tuesday tip from Dane. He'll be teaching you how to brown butter. And I will be teaching you on Thursday how to make one of my absolute favourite puds of all time, and that is treacle tart. So make sure you tune in for that. I'll see you then. Bye. Bye. That was creepy. That's a good job. I'm so good at baking, isn't it? Creep. Creep.